Well, a little earlier on tonight, I spoke to the former advisor to the government on medical ethics, Baroness Warnock, and also to Dr. Peter Saunders from the organisation Care Not Killing, who you saw in Catherine's report. Now, I began by asking the Baroness why she thinks people should have the duty to die if they are suffering from dementia.
I think dementia is the most terrible problem we've got, and it's the most pitiful and awful disease to have. And I don't believe that life is worth living for people with severe dementia. So that's why I think they ought to be able to die if that's what they've said they want.
But Baroness Warnock, you're talking about a human life being a burden, if you like, and a waste of space, taking up resource. It's a very brutal point of view, isn't it?
I don't think so. I think a lot of nurses, for example, who look after patients with severe dementia do say to themselves, why am I doing this? What is the point of it? What is the purpose of this life, which has no pleasure in it?
And family members, do you think they feel the same too?
I think for family members it's absolutely appalling having to see your parent or partner or whoever it is just go. So many people have written to me saying, I've lost him, he's gone, he's not here anymore. I think they feel he's already dead, and worse than dead, because they have to go on living with this virtually dead person. I think it's a frightful, frightful burden.
Dr. Peter Saunders, let's bring you in now. I mean, you've seen the results of our Channel 5 News poll. 2/3 of people agree with what the Baroness is saying tonight. You're on the wrong side of the argument, aren't you?
Well, I disagree with the Baroness. She was on public record back in 2008 in the Telegraph as saying that if you have dementia, you're wasting people's lives, your family's lives, and you're wasting the resources that the National
she's repeated the
Health
same thing
Service
today.
has. And I find that quite horrifying at many levels. First of all, people with dementia just do not have the capacity to be able to make these kind of decisions. They don't have the memory or the language skills, the information processing, the understanding or the judgment that's required to do it. Secondly, they're incredibly vulnerable and they're so open to exploitation or abuse or suggestion, and it's so easy for them to feel pressure to end their lives so as not to be a burden on others emotionally or financially. But thirdly, and this is the chilling thing, I think, is that sadly there are a lot of people in this country who stand to gain either financially or emotionally from the death of people with dementia. And if the law were changed to allow it, there would be some, sadly, who would want to push those boundaries for personal gain. And that's why it's so important that we have strong laws to protect vulnerable people.
And Baroness Warnock, can you understand that, Baroness Warnock? Because there are people who will be very vulnerable.
I know, I can understand it. But after all, most people, especially people who've brought up their families, always have put their families' interests before their own, or, equal with their own. And I don't see why they shouldn't be allowed to do so when they are contemplating death. I simply could not bear to think of my children having to look after me when I was completely beyond conversation and didn't even recognise them. I couldn't bear to be remembered by them like that, for one thing.
But Baroness Warnock, what happens if you were to change your mind? What happens when you're completely lucid, you make one decision, but under the cloud of dementia, you actually want to stay alive? That could happen.
I suppose I could be... let's suppose that I've made an advanced decision, a living will, because I think that's terribly, terribly important. I think everybody should be encouraged to do that, to say the conditions under which they wouldn't want to stay alive. So that's point one. If I've done that while I'm still in my right mind, I think that needs to be taken into account very seriously by anyone who's looking after me. Secondly, if I am so dotted that I don't know my own family, that I can do nothing for myself, and I'm getting no pleasure from life, then it seems to me that people ought to treat me with pity and with dignity, just in the way that they treat their pets with pity and dignity if they get to a stage where their life is a burden to them.
OK, Dr. Peter Saunders, maybe it is more barbaric to keep someone alive in that form. What would you say to that?
Well, the danger of these advanced decisions is that people make very different decisions when they're well than when they're sick. And what this
But
does...
how do you know that? And when someone is no longer communicating and is not with us, how do you know?
Well, as a doctor who's looked after many patients, I can tell you that most people who are well think, or many of them think euthanasia is a good idea, but when they're actually sick and dying, they have very, very different views about it. And a lot of people with dementia, of course, some of them are distressed, but a lot of them are actually quite happy. It might be that the world around them is falling apart and people are struggling to look after them, but they're actually in their own little world. They're quite happy. They're enjoying the pleasures of life. And I think the question is, what kind of society do we want to be in? Do we want to be in a society where the strong make sacrifices for the weak?
Baroness
Or do we
Warnock?
want to be in one where we sacrifice the weak for the sake of the strong?
OK, let's get a final point of view from Baroness Warnock.
I think it's the worst thing in the world that I can imagine to think that I, being dotty and demented, am happy, and everybody else who's looking after me thinks it's a waste of time.